This is the Engines of Our Ingenuity, made possible by the Friends of KUHF, Houston.
Today, thoughts about traffic lights, gas masks, and hair straighteners. The University of Houston's College of Engineering presents this series about the machines that make our civilization run and the people whose ingenuity created them. In 1914, a New Orleans paper reported an advertising demonstration. First, an inky thick smoke had been created. Then, an Indian assistant, Big Chief Mason, had donned the new Morgan safety hood and spent 20 minutes in the smoke without ill effect. What the onlookers didn't know was that Big Chief Mason was, in fact, Garrett Augustus Morgan, the safety hood's inventor. Morgan's mother was a freed slave, and since its birth in 1877, American racism had steadily worsened. The only way he could sell his hood was to keep his black identity quiet, so he demonstrated it in a sort of cigar store Indian disguise. Fortune found Morgan out in 1916 while he was working in Cleveland. Workers were drilling a new tunnel out under Lake Erie to supply fresh water. When they hit a pocket of natural gas, it exploded. Workers were trapped, suffocating in smoke and dust. Someone knew about Morgan's safety hood and called him in. He and his brother suited up and repeatedly went into the tunnel. They saved 2 lives and recovered 4 bodies before officials closed the tunnel to rescue efforts. Unfortunately, Morgan's race was now exposed, and that hurt his sales. Still, the gas masks used in World War I were derived from Morgan's safety hood. That was only one Morgan invention. In 1923, he came up with the device that led to our 3-way traffic lights. He saw that existing mechanical stop-and-go signals were dangerous since they had no caution signal to buffer traffic flow. So he patented a 3-armed signal. It indicated stop and go for traffic in 2 directions. It also had a 4-way stop for pedestrians, and it had a signal for moving forward with caution. That was the forerunner of today's yellow light. GE bought his patent for $40,000, which was a huge sum back then. In his late years, Morgan was highly honored for his many contributions. By the age of 30, he'd set up a small sewing machine shop where he patented sewing machine improvements. Now, sewing machine needles functioned better when they were polished, and Morgan found by chance that commercial liquid polish would also straighten hair. He figured out how to make the stuff into a cream, created his own company, and he marketed it. When I was a child, many African Americans straightened their hair so as to better blend in to a white landscape. All of Morgan's other inventions saved lives and accommodated human need, and hair straighteners met another kind of human need in 1910. Morgan did what he had to do in the worst of times. And so it is no wonder that he dreamt of celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation on New Year's Day, 1963. Garrett Morgan was still alive in 1963, but America's Emancipation Centennial in Chicago wasn't held until that August, and Morgan died 1 month before it actually took place. Today, a black immigrant provides shoes for America. The University of Houston's College of Engineering presents this series about the machines that make our civilization run and the people whose ingenuity created them. Johann MATZELIGER lived less than 37 years. Most of them were lonely ones. He was born in Dutch Guiana in 1852. His father was a white engineer, his mother a black slave. As a boy, he apprenticed in a machine shop. Quiet and fiercely intelligent, MATZELIGER put to sea in a merchant ship when he was 19. His travels took him at last to Lynn, Massachusetts. There he worked as a shoe stitching machine operator. He had tough going. Not only was he black, but his native tongue was Dutch. The Catholic, Unitarian, and Episcopal churches gave him a cold shoulder, so he took up residence inside his own head. He read and studied. He also thought about the most difficult step in making shoes. First, you sewed the shoe top together. Next, you shaped the top over a wooden model of a human foot called a last. Then, you sewed the top to the inner sole. It took great skill to bend, shape, and hold the leather while you stitched it to the bottom. The shoe machine people had invested huge sums in trying to mechanize that step. They'd failed. MATZELIGER knew he could solve the problem. He began creating a working model. He scrounged parts and went without food so he could pay for materials. All this on top of 10-hour work days. It took 5 years, but by 1882 he'd filed a patent. It was a huge, complex 15-page document. 2 businessmen funded the prototype in exchange for 2/3 of any profits. By 1855, MATZELIGER had a production model ready. At that point, he sold out for $15,000. He went on to new inventions while others got rich on his genius. MATZELIGER's last 5 years were happy ones. He gained membership in the North Congregational Church. He gained friends. He taught Sunday school, and he taught oil painting. He also poured out his inventive genius on new machines. Meanwhile, he cut the cost of making shoes in 2. When tuberculosis claimed him, his will left a big piece of his fortunes to the church that had seen beyond the color of his skin. He made special provisions for his drawing instruments, his Bible, and his technical books, the things that had really mattered to him. In 1984, Lynn, Massachusetts finally named a bridge after this good and quiet man who'd done so much for the city, who'd done so much for all America. Finally, they honored this triumph of the mind against all odds.
This is the Engines of Our Ingenuity, made possible by the friends of KUHF, Houston.
Today, a witch doctor practices computer arithmetic. The University of Houston's College of Engineering presents this series about the machines that make our civilization run and the people whose ingenuity created them. The scene is a remote Ethiopian village in 1940. A farmer offers his herd of 34 goats for sale. One goat is worth, say, $7. The villagers don't know how to multiply, so they call in a shaman. They asked him to set a fair price for the whole herd. The shaman digs 2 rows of small holes in the hard, dry earth. He reaches into his sack of pebbles and he goes to work. He puts 34 stones in the first hole on the left, 1 for each goat. He puts half that, or 17, in the next, half 17, or 8, in the next, and so on. He keeps dividing by 2 and dropping the remainder until the 6th hole has only 1 stone in it. Now he goes on to the other row. He puts 7 stones, the value of 1 goat, in the first hole. He puts twice that, or 14 stones, in the next hole, and so forth. Now his deliberations begin. He goes down the left-hand side, seeing whether the holes are good or evil. An even number of stones makes the hole evil. An odd number makes it good. 2 holes are good. The holes next to them in the right row contain 14 stones and 224 stones. He adds those numbers together. The result is the fair market value of the herd. It's $238. You and I know about multiplication, so we multiply the number of sheep by the value of a sheep, 7 times 34. When we do that, we get $238. But that's just what the shaman got. So what in the world was all the business with the holes? And would he get the right answer with different numbers? We try it with other numbers. It works every time. So we turn to a mathematician. He says it's not at all obvious. He puzzles for a long time. Finally, he sees it. This Ethiopian shaman has created a remarkable algorithm. All that business with the holes identifies the numbers in their binary form. That lets the shaman reduce multiplication to simple addition. He's multiplied just the way a digital computer does. Where did his method come from? How long have his forebears carried this rote tradition? An anonymous genius lurks somewhere in the haze of his history. So we look at our own multiplication and realize that we too use ritual to find out what 7 times 34 is. It makes no more sense to most people who use it than the shaman's holes. Our multiplication algorithm was also given us by an anonymous genius. He is also lost in rote tradition. So how do we and that Ethiopian shaman differ? Well, very little, I reckon. Very little indeed. Of course, I wouldn't be surprised if he makes fewer mistakes than we do. I'm John Lienhardt at the University of Houston. where we're interested in the way inventive minds work.